Hey folks, so today I want to talk a little bit about how I painted this piece here. But first things first, the things that I used to do it. So I've been using Procreate on my iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil, and the brushes I was using were a combination of the standard brushes in Procreate, primarily the graphite one because it's lush, and some Max Packs brushes as well. I'll put a link in the description to them. I was using watercolour and the comics pack as well because they're really lovely, as well as some handmade textures that I scanned in myself. So it's a combination of a load of different things. So let's get started on how exactly I painted it. So I wish I could say I had this really cool technique at the beginning of my illustrations to plan it, like I use silhouettes or collage or something cool like that, but really when I get an idea I'll just start drawing. So that's what I was doing here. It's still a rough sketch layer, so I'll never go straight into the final line work. This was just a chunky graphite brush and I was playing with some ideas and playing with what I wanted the composition to be. Once I was happy with that, I dropped the opacity of that sketch layer and started drawing the more cleaned up line work on top. So this cleaned up final line work layer is using the exact same brush that I used for the sketch layer. All I did was I made it a little bit smaller so I could get those tiny details in there. All I'm doing is working over the top of that sketch layer. I'm not directly tracing it because there'll be changes that I want to make, there'll be things I didn't notice before, bits I want to add, bits I want to take away. I mean, I changed my mind about the shape that I want the big frog in the back, that I want their body to be 100 times, which is what you should be doing at this stage. You're working out the final parts of this illustration, the final layout that you want this to have. Once I'm happy with the line work, that's when I will start working in some flat colour. So I like working with block flat colour first because I love alpha locks, I love clipping masks, I like having a border to the sort of colours that I'm going to be using. So that's what I was doing here after I drew in the tree line work. I wanted to work with an autumnal sort of colour scheme to this, and I've been over the last 2 or 3 years working out how to use limited colour palettes because I used to be real bad at that. Everything would just be a rainbow. So I was trying really hard in this piece in particular to limit my palette to something warm and autumnal with some hints of a warmed up dusty blue in there. So once I got all my block colour in and my flats in, I alpha locked every single colour layer and started working with textures and tone on top. Another reason I really enjoy using clipping masks and alpha locks is I get to use massive brushes. I really like creating texture with as big a brush as possible because I find when I use a smaller brush the lines look quite nervous and they look like you've carefully tried to colour them in bit by bit, and I don't like that. I like things to look confident. So I make the brushes nice and big, but in particular I like using the Nico roll brush, which is a standard brush on Procreate. It's got a gorgeous texture. You can blow it up to be really big. So once I started adding in those textures with the alpha locks, that's when I would colour the line work as well, because I was saying earlier how I like the line work to be coloured too. I'll just lock the line work layer, go straight on top of that with a colour similar to the colour it's surrounding. So for example on the scarf I would just eyedrop that shade of blue, drop it down a bit darker, sometimes oversaturate it a little bit as well depending on what works best contrast wise, and then I go through all the line work and colour it in exactly the same way. So at this point I was trying to work out what blending mode or layer style I wanted to use for the blue overlay I was putting in the background to add a bit of depth and a bit more coldness. So I put a navy blue, very similar to her scarf colour, around the background apart from the frog's face, and I was just playing around with the blending modes to see which one would work and playing with the opacity. I think in the end I settled with linear light as the blending mode for that. It worked really well, it maintained the contrast but it made everything a little bit darker and a little bit colder. And then the front I wanted to maintain most of the warm colour apart from a bit of a vignette around the edge, which is what I'm doing here. Once I had that in place, once I had the depth in place, that's when I could add some of the smaller details. I was very nearly finished at this point. I'm very wary that sometimes I will overwork my work and it becomes too busy and difficult to read, so I tried to hold back on that in this piece. It was just a few little extra details, a little bit of texture here and there, some simple line work leaves. Not everything needs texture, not everything needs to be hyper worked into realism, so I tried to keep it as stylized and minimal as possible for some of the background here and keep the focus on the two main characters in the piece. Once I was finished, I put it all into Photoshop as a flattened JPEG, played around with the saturation, did a bit of dodge and burn, and here's what it ended up looking like. I was really chuffed with this piece. I was really excited to put this in my portfolio, and I'll definitely be doing more work like this in the future. Thank you for watching. I hope that was interesting, listening to me chat some nonsense about my work, and I'll be doing more videos as well, because this was proper fun. So thanks for watching, and have a good one.